Next item, Mike.
Under Education, Gemini II Redesign Project. The Gemini II Redesign Project restructures traditional school practices to redesign schools around the 5 outcomes established by the Kansas State Board of Education. The purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide an overview of proposed projects to redesign an elementary school and a high school to become demonstration schools that define how students become successful high school graduates. This presentation for the board is to approve the submission of a Gemini II redesign application to the Kansas State Department of Education.
Good evening and welcome. We're looking forward to this one.
Well, good evening. We are very excited to share. I think we have our seating situation resolved now. We were also excited that we all decided we wanted to participate this evening in sharing with you this wonderful opportunity for us to actually be able to collaborate with KSDE on this initiative to be considered, to be recognized as a Gemini II school district. And it's a pretty big deal, and it's pretty exciting that we have staff that are excited about this, and we have our administrators from Cessna Elementary as well as Chester Lewis Academic Learning Center. And we're going to tell you what our proposal is for these 2 buildings. Also, I think you know everyone, but just in case, we have Gil Alvarez from our secondary office and Michele Ingenthron from elementary, and they're actually going to talk about the proposals from those buildings. I'm going to begin by just giving a little bit of background information to let you know how we landed here today. This past fall, Dr. Watson was here and he visited our district, and he actually came to a board meeting and he talked about, he had participated on these listening sessions across the state, and he had talked to educators and business leaders and community leaders and other stakeholders. And through those listening sessions, he was able to outline what describes a successful high school graduate. And so all of the districts across the state are working towards this, but also looking at 5 very clear outcomes. What we are saying are evidence-based practices to help reach and meet the goals related to that successful high school student. That's working around emotional and social skills, kindergarten readiness, individual plans of study, high school graduation, and post-secondary success. Now, what you'll find very similar is our own Dr. Thompson also participated in listening sessions across the state, not the state, but across our city. Could have been across the state, because what happened was through her listening sessions with the Wichita Public School community, with our stakeholders, there are very similarities in what our stakeholders said they wanted to see in our schools in comparison to what Dr. Watson also heard across the state. What we heard in Wichita is that our stakeholders wanted us to support that whole child. And that is those social, emotional, character development skills, those soft skills that are going to help our students be successful in the workforce. They also wanted us to address civic duties and responsibility of our students, that they wanted us to provide choices and opportunities. And these choices and opportunities are beyond just magnet schools. Choices and opportunities that we have opportunities in all of our schools to help meet the differentiated needs of our students and to provide interest in those real-life application opportunities, that our students have access to technology, and that we are continuously raising that bar to reach high school graduation. So what Dr. Thompson heard is very similar to what Dr. Watson heard across the state. And so how that information that Dr. Watson heard across the state was taken was to begin to talk about what is it that we want our schools to look like in the future? What are we going to do to meet the needs of our kids beyond our traditional practices that we've done since the beginning of time? One is redesigning curriculum and instruction. And that doesn't mean just a different textbook. I don't know how to get rid of that. But that doesn't mean just a different textbook. While he fixes that, I'll keep talking. It means, again, what are those choices and opportunities that we're doing differently in our classrooms? How are we providing real-life application? How are we using technology? How are we helping kids reach for the moon? Also, with the redesign, Dr. Watson says he wants us to challenge how we have typically used our staff. If we truly are thinking about social emotional character development, then we might have to think about how we use staff differently sometimes to address that. If we are wanting to make sure that we are helping students plan for post-secondary, then what staff might be able to help with that? And that may look different than how we have always done it traditionally. And then also what's very important is that we are engaging our community and being very strategic and having them be partners with us in this process. Because, I mean, I've heard teachers say, and I've heard Dr. Thompson also referred to, it really takes a village. And so we need our community partners to assist us with internships and helping students think about what those post-secondary goals are. So that was part of what the redesign began to focus around. And then there's this application process. This application to even be considered for a Gemini II district means that a school district must identify one elementary and one secondary school that they are willing to think about how we're going to get to the moon. How are we going to redesign our schools around those 5 outcomes that I spoke of a little bit earlier? And that they complete the application and that they are committed to doing that. And not just folks sitting in our offices. But what's important is that schools want to do it, that teachers believe that this redesign is going to help us meet not only those 5 outcomes, but it's good for our kids. And so staff from both Cessna as well as Chester Lewis in recent weeks have voted to see how committed they were. And I'm so excited to say that over 90% of the teachers from both of those buildings said, we believe in this, and this is what's good for our kids. So I'm going to turn it over to Michele and Gil that are going to tell you about our proposals.
So our elementary school is Cessna Elementary. Cessna is located at 45th Street South in the south part of our city. There are currently 2 regular education classrooms, K through 5, also 2 pre-K classrooms. And when I checked the enrollment this week, they had 485 kiddos. Just a little bit about Cessna. Part of Cessna's redesign, Dr. Irving talked about outcomes. These are the outcomes that Cessna's staff has chosen to focus on. And the innovative approach to educating the whole child that they are going to undertake, they feel like they will be able to show outcomes and help their kids move on to their secondary school education. Go ahead. In terms of what they plan to do at Cessna, over the 3 years, there will be a formation of 2 mindfulness classrooms. And what that means is they will have a primary and an intermediate classroom that will be cross-grade level, not only for academics, so meeting kids where they are academically. We know sometimes academic issues with kiddos can cause some frustration in the classroom, so taking that into consideration when thinking about the whole child. But also meeting kids where they are socially, emotionally. Oftentimes we think of that as behavior, but we know as we're learning more and more about chronic stress and trauma that it is much more than that. So meeting kids where they are in those areas, and as Dr. Irving talked about using staff a little bit differently, they plan on using their social workers to help in those classrooms, along with 2 certified teachers that are, the last time I spoke to Mr. Snodgrass, who's the principal, they were fighting over who was going to get the opportunity to do this, so that's pretty exciting too. They will use sensory, part of those rooms will also be sensory and calming areas, and they will have that across their building just as part of who they become. One of the outcomes they've chosen there is the social emotional growth, and they're going to do that in 2 different ways. The first is using biography-driven instruction. So when you think about everything in your life that makes you you and who you are, biography-driven instruction is taking that part of you and bringing it into the classroom. honoring a child's culture, their home, their language, all of their experiences, and tying that into instructional strategies. Not only is that instruction, but it is also the work of our SECD work. They will also focus on brain development and, again, that chronic stress, and teaching teachers what the brain goes through when kids experience chronic stress, how to help kids regulate themselves and their behaviors, and what we know as life skills, being able to function in our workplace. We will start to work on those skills, helping kids know how to regulate their own emotions. Another outcome is kindergarten readiness, which is really kind of the same thing I've just talked about, but working with that in our pre-K, in our two pre-K classrooms, because we know that if we can help kids academically and on the regulation and be able to control emotions and have those social skills that we want them to have as they enter kindergarten, they will be much more successful. Another outcome is the individual plans of study, which we hope will impact our graduation rates. We know that our secondary schools are using Zello, which is the electronic or online individual plans of study. And so as we roll out some project-based instruction and technology-rich classrooms with some one-on-one computer instruction for kids, we will hopefully pique their interest in some careers and some topics that they're interested in. So in 4th and 5th grade, allowing them to get on that tools that some of our secondary kids are using and explore and dream and hopefully lead them to a career path or be college and career ready.
Now moving on to secondary, we are extremely excited for this opportunity for Chester Lewis Learning Academy. I first want to just say thank you to Principal Parks and to all the staff at Chester Lewis for having this open mind and really digging in deep and providing feedback on what this really looks like. Chester Lewis right now is our alternative school, and what we really wanted to look at was the idea of supporting the whole child. What does that look like? How does it look a little bit different than you would in a comprehensive setting, so when kids come, they feel that difference? So we'll talk through some of those. Right, currently they have around 327 students for virtual school and 140 students in their alternative education at Chester Lewis. Our specific outcomes we're looking at also is social emotional growth, and they've done some work already on how do we really tap into the social emotional growth for the students there at the alternative school. They've talked about trauma-informed practices as well. I actually had an opportunity to see a great presentation done by their counselors and social workers as they were talking to their students as well. So social emotional growth will be part of this plan, as well as the individual plan of study, which we are currently doing in our secondary schools. And obviously focusing on high school graduation. We definitely want students that come to Chester Lewis to have the alternative setting, but really focusing on making sure that they do graduate. It may be at a different speed. That's going to be part of our plan as well when we talk about flexible schedules, so they can get through the work and also get through so they can get to that graduation ceremony. And also the post-secondary success. So we're going to focus a lot around our career tech ed, using the individual plans of study to see what interests the students have so we can push them towards an area that they'd be interested in if they're interested in a career as well. So some of the first part is our facility redesign. We want them to feel a little bit different when they show up to Chester Lewis. So we are going to do some flexible seating in classrooms, but we also want to start with a mindfulness room that will allow students to self-regulate, teach them breathing techniques in order for them to regulate themselves and then go back into the setting to continue to educate and do their assignments and do their work. So we're excited about that. The flexible seating just to allow a little different setting than what they're used to. Instead of having normal desks in rows, it could be tall tables, it could be bean bags, it could be a lot of different ways where students can engage in their learning at their discretion and how they feel is most necessary for them, because we will be looking at also a blended learning concept. But the flexible schedule is what they currently do right now, which is exciting because it allows for, if students can't get there at 8 o'clock, they want to have a flexible schedule to make sure that they are meeting their needs. It's what they're there for. It's an alternative setting. So being able to, maybe a student needs to come in at 9, but they can still get that class needed for that. Also, they'll be at their own pace and working at their own pace. So it doesn't necessarily have to be It could be within a semester, it could be within 9 weeks. If they finish a particular class, they can move on to their next one. So they're kind of going at their own pace. So social emotional year one, we were looking at social emotional behavior trainings as we start to continue to look at what are those practices that we need to have within the school. We also want to use our SECD curriculum, and right now we're looking at what are some of those skills that students are going to need for the social emotional growth. We talk about forgiveness, we can talk about empathy, a lot of different skills that we could use, but we really want to look at which one of them, and that's going to be part of their curriculum too, what the students will get when they're there. So that's the whole, supporting the whole child, not just in academics, but also the skills they need to be college and career ready. And a lot of that will be centered around interpersonal, and even cognitive skills as we're looking at that particular curriculum for the students at Chester Lewis. We will continue to use the individual plan of study, high school graduation, looking at a blended learning, so they'll be using our Edgenuity program online as well as direct instruction, so it'll be blended instead of just the one concept. And then individualized pacing, so the content, when it's mastered, the students will advance at their own pace, and they currently do that now as well. So the individual plan of study will continue to be used to look at some career interests and those CTE opportunities, and we tap into some of the pathways that we have within CTE that they're interested in. So really have a focus on the career with the individual plans of study. And then year two, we really want to look at, even though they're doing some of this, and some teachers are already want to use it because there's a lot of technology that they can use, but we really want to get to a technology-rich classroom to go one-to-one classroom laptop initiatives, or one-to-one with student to laptops, so they can use that. So we want a year, though, to plan to make sure that teachers have the appropriate training in order to get trained to work with the students. And then obviously we do want to tie that into project-based learning in the end as well. So students are doing some hands-on learning as they're using that technology. So some of the standards being used will be through demonstration or through the hands-on work that they do within Chester Lewis as well. So we're extremely excited about the opportunity for this venture and this journey, and I just applaud the principals and all the staff, the counselors and child study team members that have really have the feedback and opportunity to get this going. So as we create a vision, not only for Kansas, but our district, we're excited at these changes that we can make to really individualize the learning for our students and for their success. So just to end with a quote, student achievement does not always equate to student success. Obviously, if you teach the whole child, there's other successes too that come about for our students as they go through Cessna and Chester Lewis. So that concludes our presentation. If there's any questions.
Sure we do. Julie?
It looks like at both of these sites, you already have defined some specific things, changes that you'd like to make, and you probably have to do that for the application process. I'm sure they
Correct.
want to see commitment and thought.
Correct.
But once these schools get into these programs and they start having their meetings and their discussions, do they have the flexibility to change if they want to, or are they already locked into these specific plans and paths?
Musical chairs. There is some flexibility once we begin. That's why year one really is the planning year. So we will submit the proposal based upon the feedback that we've received from the staff, but definitely once we get into the nuts and bolts of planning, if the staff determines that, we really hadn't thought about this, or this is something else that we need, then we definitely can build those components in. With this, though, is, like I said, the planning stages, but just really the opportunity, and what you'll probably picked up from both of these, is both of these schools have identified there is a tremendous need to focus on the whole child. And so academics are important, and we will continue to provide that rigorous opportunity, but the choices to go with that is going to be challenging and difficult if we really don't begin to think about how we are doing things differently to not just teach academics, but also help our students through, as some of the things that Michele talked about, the trauma and things that they come to school with, and how do we support them better so they can be successful in that area as well as the academic. But there's definitely opportunities to change or
Flex the
enhance.
plan as you go along. Thank you.
Stan?
Thank you, Mike. Very excited about that we're getting this started. This is something that we all really need to start concentrating on, is those 5 steps that we do think successful high school graduate will. We're moving away from strictly assigning a test score to a child and saying, you are eligible to go to college, you should go get a career. What we're saying now is our future high schools, our future education system is gonna have to be based on a balanced person, which includes academic performance, but also, you know, can you accept the responsibilities that life is gonna throw at you after you finish high school? So I'm very excited that we're finally taking this first step. The faster we can get this going, the better. I realize that's not just us, it's the state. We'll need the support of the state, we'll need the support of the public. So my quick question, though, is will Cessna stay a neighborhood school if, for the children that live in that area? Will they have to go to a different school if they do not, or they are the ones who will be participating in this Gemini II new school?
Yes, the students that live in that boundary area, it's their neighborhood school, will continue to go, and the teachers will support any kiddo who walks through the door. They will be armed with all of these different strategies to support however needed.
And now everything will be seamless in that direction.
Yes.
Okay, and then let's say there is a parent that lives in that neighborhood and says, no, I still want my child to strictly be assigned a reading score or a writing score, and I don't believe in this new style. Will they have the option of, what would their options be?
Really, for the students that attend Cessna, they, in terms of grades, we will still do what the rest of the district is doing. They will still take the same FastBridge dip-ins to see how kids are doing. The difference will come in the approach that the teachers take in teaching the kids and taking that approach of the whole child, the academic piece, the social emotional piece, the biography piece, and taking all of that knowledge that they're gonna get and crafting their lessons using those strategies around the needs of each individual child.
Thank you.
Ernestine?
I'm really excited about this. As a matter of fact, my adrenaline is pretty high on being, whoa, this is great. Is it a 3-year experiment? Is that what you would say? Or is it a 3-year move in with the idea that we're going to go ahead after the 3 years?
So the 3 years is what is recommended to be a successful launch of implementation.
So the 3 years is a launch. It's not just at the end of 3 years, we then say,
Not
throw
at
it out.
all.
Okay.
Because our goal from this is that, with your approval this evening, that we would submit an application to KSDE to be considered to be a Gemini II. And I feel in my bones that we can get accepted because what we are proposing is good for kids and we have staff who want to do it. But our goal is that we learn from this process and that we have an opportunity from participation in Gemini II with these 2 sites that we can continue to grow and enhance other buildings across the district shooting for the moon. So Gemini II recognition means that we can be considered across the state as 2 demonstration schools, an elementary and a secondary, and that not only would 259 learn from this process, but that we would have an opportunity to collaborate with other Gemini schools across the state, as well as those schools to learn from us.
I'm very, as I said, I'm very excited, and I really do hope that we can make this very aware and obvious to the outsiders to come and look. And this is one of the things that I think sometimes we don't toot our own horn. I once had a department chairman who said, "He that tooteth not his own horn, get his own horn not tooteth."
Okay.
And I am excited about the adventure. Now, I want to know about the elementary school. Is there to be a class size limit that we're going to aim for?
Not necessarily, because it's a neighborhood school. And so if you live in that neighborhood, we want you to walk through the doors and we will
Okay.
teach you.
Okay, and what about Chester Lewis? Will that have a typical teacher-student ratio that about what it is now at Chester Lewis?
We definitely want to stay within what it is, but depending on we want to grow it to a certain point, but we don't want to make it too big where we can't get individualized instruction, so.
Exactly. And we want individualized instruction, and we want to be able to have that personal connection, because so very often these children that have the more emotional issues in their lives, all they need is just one person to be in their cheering squad, one teacher who says, "Is it okay with you today?" So I'm really excited about this. And I'm tempted to want to resign from the board and apply for a job. 'Cause
We're not doing that again.
I think this is just wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl,
I too am very excited about this project. I think it's a win-win for us as a district, and I also think it's a win-win for the state. When Gemini 1 started last year, I know that we didn't really have the kind of notice that we needed to get 90% of our staff on board and the union and so on. So I'm glad that we are applying this year, very glad. And I think that we've chosen 2 buildings that can be leaders for us. They have strong leadership in those buildings, and obviously the staff is behind it. So I would like to, because I think you need us to approve a motion to support this project, and I'd like to make that motion that we support this project and go forth quickly.
And I second it.
And I'm sorry, we failed to recognize our administrators, those strong administrators that are going to help us lead this work are here. I'm sorry. Mr. Parks and Mr. Snodgrass, thank you for being here. And thank you.
okay, I do have a question before we move on with the vote. As I sit here and listen to this tonight, it sounds a lot like our metro schools that we had before. What are the differences between this and a metro school?
I'd have to think back to
Quickly.
what the metros were back then, but this one, I think, with the blended learning and the whole social emotional learning, or the practices that will be put forth, is definitely going to help. But I think the idea of individualized learning, as well as having a student advocate, so every student has that one adult at the school to help them through. The blended learning, using the edgenuity within the classroom, I think is going to be different, as well as the one-to-one in year 2 and the project-based learning.
All right,
And the individual plan of study, that is correct. That would be different as well.
okay, I appreciate that, thank you. You have to put up with Ernestine one more time.
I just wanted to say, I really want to emphasize the idea of making sure that the publicity for the successes in this are well known. One of the things that happened during the Metro era was that they won numerous national awards. It was never, ever broadcast. It was like, we want to hide in the corner. Now, I don't think anybody consciously decided that. But there were people from all over the United States that came to look and watch at that successful program and take back the model. But never, ever did the public know what a wonderful success. This sounds like it's picking up the very best of what that was. And I want to make sure that I, for one, will toot the horn. So,
I was going to say, we'll toot. We will toot
We have other
our
tutors.
horns.
We're gonna have
Loud
to
and
edit some of
clear.
this out, I believe.
Clear that up.
All right, we have a motion on the floor from Cheryl, and I'm gonna take the second from Ernestine because I don't wanna get in trouble afterwards
yes,
for acceptance.
yes, yes, yes. I can figure out how to do this.
Looks like it's time to move forward. Thank you very much. Motion passes 7-0.